publishing a wonderful book and sharing it with us.
Well, Zita, thank you. I want to thank both Zita and David, who have become very good friends, and I couldn't have better friends in the whole world, and very, very talented people. Every time I see them, even if they're just shooting the breeze, I come away with some kind of wonderful thing. So the gift of friendship goes on.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, both of you, for having me here. And thank all of you for coming. I'm really touched, and it's just very sweet to have friends, come and participate in this. You may want to leave when I tell you what it's about. I think the door is closed and locked. The dogs that they have that you didn't see are actually outside waiting to grab you. That's how it goes. Being a little nervous about this, I forgot my glasses, so when I make up things and I go along.
Can I lend you some?
Now let me see how it goes. I think I've got good light here, so I can probably read. Let me tell you just a little bit about this book. First of all, this is a proof copy, so it's not the hardback, which is much more lovely. But as you can see, I've been using it for my talks. But I taught for 40 years as a college professor, some of you know, and my PhD is in American Studies, so I taught interdisciplinary work of one kind or another. But my last 16 years were at UTEP in English department. Can you guys hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe you don't want to, but. So I really didn't see myself writing a memoir, which we think of as being about ourselves. But memoir is a really interesting form. It's really about both the interiority, if you will, of a person, perhaps, the narrator, the person writing the book, but also the external world. So it's kind of a dialogical relationship there between the outside world and the inner world of someone reflecting maybe on that outside world. So when I discovered that, because I was teaching memoir, but I'd never written a memoir, this was for another university, I realized, well, okay, maybe I could write about my own hometown, where I grew up. And one reason I wanted to do it, and maybe some of you can identify with this, and maybe others might not at all, but where I grew up was called the Great American Desert on the 19th century maps. Even though it's a grassland primarily, and a land really of arroyos like we have here in the canyons and so forth, it's mainly known for its flatlands. And I bet everyone in here has gone down I-40 past my farm will say, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's boring as hell. It's flatlands,
On the way to the Cadillac Ranch, right?
Yeah, the Cadillac Ranch is out there on I-40, west of Amarillo, Texas. But I've always been an advocate of the underdog and of the underwritten and of the under-researched. In the 70s, I did a lot of work on women of color and on women's studies and things like that. And when finally the so-called multicultural movement came along, I was really already signed up because I think that there are things in our lives that are very important that seem not important to other people. And of course, every life is important and every place is important. And our lives within our places are very important. So I thought one summer in 2005, when I had nothing to do in the small town of Vega, Texas, why don't I see what's over the next fence? And so out at our farm, there's two portions to our farm. It's about 1,200 acres combined. There are what are called draws that run through both sections. And those actually, I discovered by doing some research, were once something called the Middle Alamosa Creek. So a draw means a kind of land that's inundating, that draws the water. And so this had been a creek at one point that ran, I discovered by looking at topo maps, all the way to the Canadian River, 30-something miles. And then, because my dad had always talked about this guy named Isabel Gurley, who was one of the early settlers in the Canadian River Valley, I realized at one point, doing some investigation, that the farm, where Middle Alamosa Creek headed, ended up in the Canadian River right next to Isabel's camp and his dugout. So to me, there was a connection of the two men, you know, physically through the landscape, but also through their stories. So this book that I've written is largely about trying to find these stories, bring them back to life, not just Isabel's, but anything in between Armitage Farm and Isabel's camp. So just to give you an idea of what I discovered in hiking this area and then doing research, is that all the major 19th century expeditionary government surveys traveled across the Middle Alamosa Creek. Marcy, Whipple, Abert, there's a whole long list of them. They were either looking for a southern railroad route, or a trail to the Gold Coast, you know, to the 1840s gold rush in California, or tracking something like the Red River, you know, trying to find its headwaters and so on. And for the longest time, they thought the Canadian River was the Red River. And they thought this because Kiowa people called it the Red River in their language, because it's a Permian soil and it's very, very red. So they called it the Red River. So Abert and others said, oh, the Red River, you know, but when they followed it, it was not the Red River. So there's these major expeditions, and then the major Spanish entradas. I mean, Coronado crossed there, Oñate crossed there, and others. And as a matter of fact, one of the springs that's still running along this Middle Alamosa Creek was documented by Oñate in 1601 as flowing. And that does my heart good, you know, because we all know that we're in trouble water-wise in the Southwest. And so, of course, this plot of land, this 30 miles, is over the Ogallala Aquifer. And though there's no irrigation in this particular area, there is south. And so the water table has declined through the years, so there's not many springs left. So this may not sound like much to you, but when I discovered there are springs still along this way, I just was fascinated. So, of course, in Texas, as you probably know, most land is private. And I did have permission of the two landowners north of me, and there are only 2 ranches that make up that 30 miles, to cross over the barbed wire fences and to keep going, you know. So I wanted to see what I would see, but also to see if I could find these lost voices and bring them back into the landscape. So why don't I just read you, and of course I should add that when you're finding stories and trying to resurface them, you're also laying down stories. So as I was hiking, of course, my own life was going on and things were happening there. And